Good afternoon, everyone. You're listening to My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm your host, Jasmine Urbina, here in the studio with my dad and co-host, Alex Urbina. And today we are going to be talking about making up stories. We're going to be talking about the stories that we make up, the stories that the people that we love make up, and kind of ask some questions that maybe we haven't thought about before as to why we make these stories up and how they affect other people.
I think this is a great topic because, a lot of time being unconscious, we don't realize that we do make up stories and how important those stories are. That affects our mood. It affects our psyche. It affects our feelings. And, it could put us in, certain moods that we were often sitting there wondering, why do I feel like this? And not realizing that we could be making up stories that have been generated and causing those experiences.
So I have kind of a concept or a little bit of an idea why I make up stories. I guess I would like to share that and then also ask you why, or in your experience, why other people make up stories. For me, I know that I make up stories because my brain needs to fill a gap. So if something happens, my brain needs to tell me why, or my ego needs to tell me why I did something or why somebody did something or whatever. So in your experience, what do you think is the reason for that, or why do other people do it?
I think that's the exact reason, is that the brain when it doesn't have enough information to understand or comprehend why something is happening or why, certain people are doing what they're doing, the brain or the ego has to complete it. It can't sit there and just allow it to be what it is. And as human beings, we haven't trained ourselves to look at things for what they are, which is, it is what it is. After it is what it is, we give it meaning. And a lot of us have never trained ourselves to allow things to just be what they are. Meaning, someone came in and was frustrated and said something to us. We can't just let it be, somebody that came in and shared some words with us. We have to create up a story, give it meaning, to be able to make sense to our brain. So what we make up is, why did you do that? You shouldn't have done that. Or, you're yelling at me and it's not my fault. Why are you making it my fault? So we go on these tangents and create all these stories and paint a picture of our own reality of what's happening, and we're not realizing that things first are what they are, and then after that we're giving it its own meaning.
Yeah, sometimes I hear you say, either in a training or to a group or to me, and you'll say, if you're going to make up a story about something, why does it have to be negative? Why can't you make up a positive to a story? Do you have any tips or any maybe advice that you could give us so that we can train ourselves to start making up more positive and more reinforcing stories?
The first step is through the practice of awareness. So it's realizing and being more aware that I am making up a story. I'm a story machine. And in 24 hours, or in the last 12 hours of my day, I've been constantly making up stories about everything. As soon as you walk in the house, you look around and you see the house a mess, boom, you're making a story. You miss a phone call from somebody, you're waiting for a phone call to come in from someone and they don't make the phone call on time, boom, you're making up a story. So it's just, you have to realize that you're constantly making up stories all day long. So first, it's the awareness. Once you become hyper aware that you're a story maker, is now the next phase. Phase 2 is you realizing that you actually have the choice to make up any kind of story that you want, rather than you being totally unaware and unconscious that you're making up the story. Because you're making up the story unconsciously, you're probably sticking to the top 3 or 4 stories that are negative, that get you all riled up and get you defensive or get you upset, and they're the same ones over and over again. But if you're not aware that you're making the story up in the first place, you can't change it. So it's through the awareness that causes the shift of consciousness and realizing, wow, I am making up stories. And then once you realize that you are making them, then you can decide, well, if I'm making them, why can't I make them any way that I want? So that it empowers me, so the story inspires me, so that the story propels me to move forward, so that the story creates an opportunity for me to find a solution, rather than swimming around in the story being a victim and being victimized by poor me or blaming other people.
Yeah, I don't know why naturally, I'm going to speak for myself, but I know a lot of people do it, but naturally I make up a story, or I come to a conclusion, or whatever it is I make up, and it's always negative. The first one is always negative. I have to consciously tell myself, stop, don't make anything up yet, or if I already have, to kind of try to switch it. So it's really confusing for me, because I feel like I'm positive. I feel like I'm a very positive person, but I always think negatively, or I have to catch myself in order to switch it. It doesn't naturally come in a way that I would positively think about myself.
But
or
you should be
situation.
excited about that. That as me, for me as a coach, that's getting me excited, because you're describing the first phase of becoming more conscious and more aware, is when you're telling on yourself and saying, I have to catch myself and then force myself to create a new empowering story. Those are the early stages of becoming more aware and more conscious at a higher level. When you're totally unaware that you're making stories and don't know that you're making them up, then that's when you can't choose anything different other than being on automatic pilot and coming up with the same story over and over again, and then being disempowered by it.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I'm kind of struggling with right now is, because I'm aware of that and I notice it a lot in other people, and the people that I surround myself with, people that I love, I see them doing it too. So I know I don't have any control over them, so this question, I might be answering it myself, but what can I do when I see everybody else making up all these stories, and to me it's like, whoa, calm down, that's not what happened. Like, and it's easy to just be like, you don't ever want to tell women to calm down, but it's easy to say, hey, calm down, what are you talking about? And I react instead of just letting them be. I react, and I want to get all high and mighty on them and say, hey, that you're making all that up. But in that moment, it's very frustrating for them when I come at them that way. So what would you give me advice if I have other people making up stories around me, when now I'm conscious and I know that that's what they're doing?
The first thing that you want to do is you want to not make them bad and wrong because they're making that story up. That story that they're making up is their reality. It's real for them. It's true. It's their truth. To them, that's the way they see it, and they're not going to get off it. And you trying to tell them that they're making up a story in that moment is the worst thing you can do. What you want to do is you want to validate that their perspective is, you want to honor their perspective. So you want to say, look, I know that that's how you see it, and I'm sorry that that's how that you are offended by it, or I'm sorry that you're hurt by the way that which your point of view is, and the only way that you can see it. Therefore, I need to let you know that from my perspective and from my side, that wasn't my intention. And so first, by validating that their story isn't bad and wrong, and that you're validating that it's legit for them, and then you're apologizing or cleaning it up, whether it was your intention or not, or whether you did it consciously or not consciously, making them right about it. Then now their guard comes down, and then when their guard comes down, you can open up a new possibility. So then afterwards you say, look, I know that that's how you see it. That wasn't my intention, and I'm sorry that that's how you see it, or that you got hurt. Perhaps, are you open to a possibility that that's not really how it went down? Are you open to the possibility that when I said those things, I was saying them from a loving, compassionate place, or when I was saying those things, I was saying them because I was worried, or it was my fear that was coming up? Then you can open up 10, 20 different possibilities of other stories that they can choose from, rather than the one story that they are holding on to like they got in their grips like a bear hug. So what are you hearing me say when I'm explaining to you a different way of approaching it?
I'm realizing now that if somebody's frustrated, and I'm frustrating, and in that moment, the heat of the moment, the argument, both of us really want to get our points across, but none of us are really listening to each other. So if I can find the time later, after I've calmed down, after they've calmed down, then I can express the different options and the different points of view that could have actually happened, instead of trying to force my idea on them while we're both frustrated.
And all it takes is one of you to be able to learn that ability, or develop that ability, or learn that skill, or discover that part of you. And most of the time, it's the person out of the two that's the most conscious. It's the one that's a little bit more developed. It's the one that has a little bit more experience, or a little more courage, or a little bit more audacity to say, hey, I'll be the first one to open up this conversation, or I'll be the first one to apologize or take responsibility for it. It's usually the one that has a little bit more growth, a little more depth in their consciousness to be able to articulate that and facilitate that process. If you have two unconscious people at it, and neither one of them, and both of them are stubborn, and neither one want to start that phase, then you just have a full-on war back and forth, just a full-on argument where you both are trying to be right, and then at the end of the day you're both mad at each other.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard to walk away from an argument and say to yourself, you know what, I'll get back to this later.
But because you just said that, it is hard for you, because words are important. So when you say anything is hard, guess what's going to happen?
It's going to be hard.
Yeah, so you have to even just change, even as you're talking, you have to shift some words and refer more to it. It seems to be a challenge for me to be able, once you shift it to a challenge, now all of a sudden you're in the second, third phases of now creating a new belief that, hey, it's not that challenging. I can do this. I can articulate myself. I can explain myself in a way that other people can see a new possibility and create different stories rather than the one that keeps having them fall in that dip.
Yep. For me, I make up, well, I understand that the words are important, but I make up a lot of conclusions and when other people try to, I guess, push their opinion on me, I'm more resistant to it. So I can see how when I do that, I'm not getting the results I want. So I guess it's kind of taking a look at, or the idea of treat people the way you want to be treated. So I would much rather approach the idea later than right now when we're so angry and we're getting pushback every time I try to put my opinion.
And that's great, because it's your first phase of you realizing, hey, I might need a timeout, or we probably both need a timeout to be able to calm down, cool down. And then at a later time, we can both be willing to get off of being right about the way we see it. And maybe one of us can come back and introduce a new opportunity for both of us to sit down and look at some other options. Can we both sit down and create different stories so that we can continue this relationship or continue moving and growing together? And then what's going to happen is, as you do more of that more consistently, you're going to be able to bring that forth to you actually in the moment. And you're not going to be able to say, hey, let's do a timeout, or hey, let's both walk away and come back at a later time. You're going to learn how to be able to articulate that and do it right in the moment, where you catch yourself and then you actually invite the other person and yourself to engage on looking at new possibilities for yourself.
So as a parent, we've kind of talked about this before, but as a parent, if you're in an argument with your kid, or you have a disagreement or whatever that looks like, and they walk away, they go to their room, sometimes it's, I guess, challenging for parents to take the bigger step and go back and say, hey, we need to readdress this and talk about it. I know that a lot of people just kind of ignore things or figure, what time.
When you say people, you mean parents?
Yeah, parents. I mean, kids too. I just wouldn't expect, as a parent, I wouldn't expect my kid to be the one to come in and want to readdress the topic if I wasn't being the example. So I'm speaking for parents. Like, I know for me as a kid, I would need my parent to do that a couple times before I could come out of my room and say, hey, can we talk about what happened?
I'm glad you said that, because in my 23 years of working with teens in the capacity that I do, that's what all of them are yearning for. All teens are yearning for their parents to grow and develop and be the example to teach them how to be able to live their life like that in a powerful way. And so it is your job as a mom, as a dad, to learn how to master your own emotions, to master your own perspectives, to learn those abilities to be able to be the bigger one, to go back in their room and clean it up. Hey, Johnny, or Timmy, I'm sorry that's how you see it. Can we talk about it again? And I'm here with open eyes and an open perspective, and I really want to see it the way you see it. So explain it to me again. That's what our kids are yearning for. They're yearning for the parents to master their ability to communicate and to master their ability to be in relationships and to connect and to be open-minded and all those good things. And most of us aren't. I'm going to say 90% of us as parents have some major dysfunctions that we haven't worked on to be able to be that extraordinary parent for our kids, to build them up and inspire them to be powerful, confident human beings in our world.
Yeah, and I think a way for parents to understand that is to maybe take a look at a time when you were in an argument with somebody and you wanted them to come to you and clean it up, or even if you had that knee shaking feeling where you wanted to go up to them and start talking about it, but you were too scared, or you didn't have the courage to go up and readdress the topic. It's probably a little bit easier if it's your kid, I think, than to have to go to your boss or your sister or whatever, than it is. So I think for me, the way I kind of, I guess, get courage to do things or make decisions is when I put myself in that person's shoes and say, you know what, I've been there before. Let me just be that person for them.
So when you're painting that picture of a disagreement between, son or daughter and mom or dad, and then they go into their room, they get frustrated and they slam their door. As a kid, what do you think the story is being made up about the kid towards the parent? What was the common story they would make up about their son or their mom or dad?
Either they don't love me, or they don't care about my opinion, or whatever it is you're arguing
They don't
about.
understand me.
Yeah.
They never get me. They're so righteous. They never want to try to see it my way. They're making up all those stories. So just if you're mom or dad listening, when your kid gets upset at you and they storm out or they go hide in their room, they're making up stories about you. Now, as they're making up those stories about you, if you don't go in there and a little few minutes to clean it up, to resolve it, then all they're going to do is they're going to be right about that story. And from that moment forward, they're going to be interacting with you, the ego is going to try to prove that those stories are true. They're going to be looking for the filters of, my mom doesn't care, my dad doesn't value my opinion, and he's only going to say it his way. And so they live with those stories, and those stories become beliefs. And those limiting beliefs that they are ingrained with because there were stories that weren't cleaned up or addressed, now they're operating in that relationship with you, holding all those limiting beliefs that gets in the way of you guys creating extraordinary relationships.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what happens is we see something, and if it doesn't get cleaned up, we find evidence. So every time you do something that proves, or to us proves, that they don't care about me, they don't understand me, they don't care about my opinion, I don't matter, all that stuff, every time you do something as a parent that would reflect one of those stories they made up, it's just another thing for them to collect evidence in.
They go to their deepest desire is that I hope my mom comes in before I go to bed and cleans this up with me. I mean, they're not that consciously aware, but deep down inside, there's a gut feeling. There's a gut feeling that they hope that you're mature enough to come in and resolve it, and you're not, most of you. And so what happens is they go to sleep, and then in the morning they wake up and they stuff it, or they ignore it, and then in their emotional tank they're just stuffing all that stuff, unresolved issues. You're not resolving them. You're not going back and learning how to clean it up. Hey, I'm sorry we had that disagreement, son. Let's talk about it a little bit more. I want to know a little bit more about how you see it, because I want to try to see it your way. And if you can learn how to create that kind of a relationship, what an extraordinary gift you're giving your kids. And you're teaching them so that when they become parents, they learn that from you. You've modeled that. You've taught them how to communicate and create a safe environment where we can agree to disagree, or we have a safe environment where we're teaching each other how to see new perspectives, how to create new stories. Or let's get the story straight so that when we walk out of here, you're not making these stories that aren't real. But when you leave and I haven't acknowledged that they're not real, then you walk away having them be real for you forever.
Yeah, and it's not just about teaching your kids for when they become parents, but teaching them for everything for the rest of their life in any relationship. All day long they're navigating their life with those self-limiting beliefs, or the limiting beliefs about their parents, or about relationships, or about money, or about the way the world works. They're filled with these limiting beliefs, and you as a parent can get in there and course correct that by doing some cleanup work, by going in there and addressing some of those stories that are made up, that aren't not necessarily real. Yeah, I really like this topic, so I kind of want to say some more after we get back from the break. So stay tuned for more of My Conscious Dad right here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.